Right, what's going on, guys? Welcome to the video today. Now, as you can see, it's a lovely day. It's not, it's horrible. It's that time of year, and it's that time in the football season. It's international football, and I hate it. Honestly, I can't stand international football, and it's just driving me nuts, and I can't wait for the Premier League to be back. So I'd rather talk about something more nostalgic than international football and England and Wales, whoever it is. So let's get into it. You can probably see by the title, we're going to go through my top 10 midfielders of the Premier League era. Now, I'm not including wingers. I'm not including second strikers like your Cantonars or Bergkamps or anyone like that. This is just midfielders. Players like Lampard get in it because obviously, even though he did play quite a lot off the front, Gerrard had spells where he was playing off Torres. He's still technically a midfield player, do you know what I mean? So we're just going to go for midfield players. So let's get into it. Now, in 10th place, I've actually gone for Cesc Fabregas. Now, Cesc Fabregas, technically is one of the best midfielders we've ever seen, especially in the Premier League. He was a wonderful, wonderful midfield player. And I think his ability to control football matches was magical at times. And even though he didn't win any trophies with Arsenal, I still felt he was carrying us at times. He was our captain at such a young age, and then he goes to Chelsea, and yeah, look how good he is. He wins 2 league titles, but that first league title, a lot of it was him. Matic also deserves a lot of praise, but Cesc Fabregas was making that team tick, and just a beautiful player to watch in terms of styles as well. And I still think that's Wenger's biggest mistake, was not bringing Cesc Fabregas back, because he wanted to come back, but that's in the past. But Fabregas, for what he brought, he goes 10th. It's a shame I can't put him any higher, but I think 10th is pretty reasonable. He makes the list, and yeah, that's my 10th place. Now, 9th place, slightly more different player in terms of style. I'm going to go for Kante. Now, Kante, just alone for what he did with Leicester, just for that sort of season, is just he's deserving of the top 10 just for that alone. Because you look at what Leicester did when he left the season after. He was such a massive part of that team. Obviously, Mahrez and Vardy were great as well. But he covered everything in that midfield. And Danny Drinkwater was a good midfielder as well. But Kante was doing a lot of his running. And even though Drinkwater was good, it was great. He's a Premier League winner. But I think Kante was the rock in that midfield. And then you look at what he done the season after with Chelsea. Wins the title again 2 years in a row. And look what he does after: Champions Leagues, World Cups. Magical midfielder, never stopped running, a likeable guy. Kante deserves 9th place. Now, in 8th place, I've gone for David Silva. And it pains me that I can't put David Silva any higher, because I want to put him higher. I really do. But I don't think I can. I think when I look at the midfielders that played in the Premier League, I just think he was slightly below them. Maybe not as players, but if you take into account the Premier League, how long they stayed in the league itself, longevity, that kind of thing, mixed with a bit of quality. David Silva's ability to control football matches for City is what transformed that football club. It wasn't the only reason, but in terms of creating chances, controlling football matches, he was magical to watch. Beautiful footballer, and fully deserving of the top 8 because he was magical. He was so good, and I still think to this day he doesn't get enough of the credit he deserves. At the time he did, but I feel like we've forgotten David Silva. I'd love to put him higher. I probably should put him higher, but there we go. I have to just go with my number one choice. I can't just be changing my mind. He gets 8th, but a player that's dangerously underrated, and he was a beautiful footballer. So 8th place for David Silva. In 7th, I've gone with Frank Lampard. Frank Lampard's ability to score goals from midfield is just unbelievable. It's totally his scoring record is just, it's frightening. Like, considering he's a central midfield player, to score over 200 goals for Chelsea, that's insane. And from where he was at West Ham, because I remember when he was at West Ham, a lot of the fans were booing him. Obviously, his dad was one of the coaches, and they felt like Harry Redknapp was giving him a lot of leeway, and there was favouritism. But you look at what he did. He signed for Chelsea at 23. So remember, that West Ham period was before the age of 23. And you look at what he did after. If you had said to any Chelsea fan he'd be one of the best players ever in a Chelsea shirt, I don't think they would have believed you. I don't think they would have done. But what he went on to achieve, to score over 200 goals from midfield. But it's not just that. His ability with the ball is very much underrated. It's not as good as certain players that I'm going to mention soon, but his ability to control games was very underrated as well. And he's someone who does get overlooked. When people talk about your Gerrard and Scholes, they overlook Lampard. Lampard doesn't even get a mention in the top two. And I think that's a bit unfair, because he was very, very good himself. He wasn't just goals. He had more to his game than that. And he won everything domestically with Chelsea, and he was a wonderful midfielder. So I want to give Lampard the credit he deserves, because he was very, very good. And yeah, 7th place, wonderful midfield player, and he's fully deserving of it. Now, 6th place, I've gone with Paul Scholes. Paul Scholes was asthmatic, he was small, he couldn't run, he couldn't tackle, and yet he's in my top 6 for best Premier League midfielders of all time. That's because with the ball, he was magic. His ability to control a football match, especially in his later years, was just unbelievable. Him and Carrick formed a very, very good partnership for quite a while, and he would control the whole tempo of a football match for Manchester United, and he had to change his game around, because he was a striker when he first started. He then formed a good partnership with Roy Keane, but obviously Roy Keane was seen as the better player. And then Scholes went a bit further forward when they bought Veron, and he was off the striker. And I think in the 02-03 season, I think he scored, I can't remember the actual number, but he scored a lot of goals from midfield. So he was a goal-scoring midfielder, and he had to change his game around to become a slightly deeper one. Any player that's willing to do that is just such a valuable member of a team. And he was just, if you ask all the players, they all said Scholes was the man. And his long shots were crazily good. He was such a special player, honestly. And I hated him, being an Arsenal fan. I couldn't stand him, but his ability with the ball, his long range passing, his shooting, always popping up with moments, and yeah, he's fully deserving of 6th place for me. He was such a good midfield player, and yeah, he'll be remembered for a long time. Now, 5th place, I've gone for Steven Gerrard. So I'm obviously, this whole debate with Gerrard, Lampard, Scholes, I'm putting Gerrard ahead of both of them. The reason for that is because even though Scholes controlled games for Manchester United and was brilliant at it, I think Rooney summed that up perfectly. Gerrard could do what Scholes did. Maybe not as good, but he could do what Scholes could do. I don't think Scholes could do what Gerrard did. Gerrard was carrying Liverpool for over 10 years. Like there was some really, really poor teams, and Liverpool was still getting 2nd place, top 4, and Steven Gerrard was carrying that midfield for a long, long time. And that's not disrespecting players like Mascherano and Xabi Alonso. They had great midfielders as well. Torres up front, Luis Suarez. But in every period where Liverpool were going for a downward spell, it was always Gerrard that was stepping up. Istanbul itself, could Scholes have done what Gerrard did in Istanbul? Maybe not, and that's probably where you just pip Gerrard. I think Gerrard's ability is box-to-box style. He could play anywhere. He could play right midfield, he could play in the centre, he could play a deeper midfield, he could play off the striker. He could do everything in the midfield, and he was just an all-round world-class talent for a long time. And that's why I'm just going to edge Gerrard in this one, top 5. And everyone talks about him not winning a Premier League title. Look at the team he had, and look at the teams that United and Arsenal had in the past, Chelsea. Gerrard never had that. If Gerrard was playing for any of the teams I've just mentioned, he would have had a league title, 100%. But he wasn't in enough good teams. And even the season they nearly won it with Rodgers, he's playing alongside Joe Allen and Henderson. Henderson's underrated. I like Henderson, but you see what I'm saying. It's not Scholes, it's not Roy Keane, and I felt Gerrard was just a bit unlucky in that sense. But yeah, fifth for Gerrard. 4th in my list is going to be Yaya Toure. Yaya Toure is one of the most underappreciated midfielders the Premier League has ever seen. He's the only midfielder I've seen that when he was carrying the ball, he looked like he was just playing with a bunch of under 13s or under 12s or even less. He was the same age as a lot of those players, and his sheer size, his power was just too much, and it looked like he was just a giant playing with a bunch of people half his size. I don't know why he doesn't get enough appreciation now, but if he was English, he would be considered as the best English midfielder of his time. He would. He was that good. Yaya Toure transformed City along with David Silva and Aguero, but he transformed that midfield. He did. He popped up in so many big moments. I look back at the 2 goals against Newcastle, the season where he got over 20 goals in 2014. It was just something about Yaya Toure was just, it was special, and you had to be there to watch it. I don't think clips on YouTube do it justice. You had to be there. You had to watch it unfold. He had everything, and people used to speak about Pogba being the next best thing, and he was world class. Pogba wishes he had the ability that Yaya Toure had. Yaya Toure was absolutely world class and one of the best midfielders I've ever seen. He was that good, and it would be nice if he was spoken about a bit more, because people have short memories that he was so good. I don't know why that is. Maybe because he's not English, European. I don't know what it is, but he was magical. He was absolutely magical, and he gets my 4th spot, and I'll never forget how good he was. He was unreal. Now 3rd, I've gone for Roy Keane. Roy Keane, another one who doesn't get the credit he deserves in terms of his footballing ability. He's obviously well known. He's one of the main pundits in football now, and but his footballing ability, honestly, it's underrated. He was the main leader in Manchester United's team. Everyone talks about Scholes and Beckham, but Keane was wanted by every single club in world football in his peak. He was. People forget that as well. The younger generation, I understand them being a bit dismissive because they didn't see him. They didn't see it in front of their very eyes. Roy Keane was just the heartbeat of the whole team. Not just the midfield, the whole team. His ability to drive forward in a box-to-box style. He then calmed it down a bit after his injury, went a bit deeper. But it was just, honestly, Roy Keane in his pomp was scarily good. And his battles, are what made the Premier League so great. But it's his underrated ability on the ball that I feel gets forgotten. He wasn't just a tough tackler. He wasn't just a hard man. He was clever. He was a very clever player. I've never seen a player so good at being in deep positions and playing little 6-yard passes but through defences, like a bit like what Carrick used to do. But what Roy Keane used to do that all the time. He would just control everything. He was so clever, and still to this day, I don't think I've seen many better. I've seen better, but not many. Roy Keane was ahead of all of the guys I've mentioned already. He was just, again, Real Madrid and Bayern Munich, they all wanted him. They all wanted Roy Keane. Scholes doesn't become Scholes without Roy Keane. These are guys who were the heartbeat of Manchester United, and they would kill for a guy like him now. Absolutely kill. Roy Keane gets 3rd. I don't think words do it justice, really. I think he was just, you just had to be there and witness it. He was just the heartbeat of the entire Premier League at one point. Roy Keane was just dominating, absolutely dominating. Now, 2nd place, I've gone for someone a bit different. I've gone for Kevin De Bruyne. Now, he's probably the first of the players who are still playing. Kevin De Bruyne, I feel like people were kind of flirting with the idea of putting him in their list a few years ago, when he'd still been in the Premier League for about 5-6 years. But now I think you look at it, it's been 9 years since he was signed. Kevin De Bruyne has just completely transformed City from when, don't get me wrong, they were a good team when he came, and he's just made them even better. And he's epitomised the whole Pep journey. He is just unreal. Every single year, people write off Kevin De Bruyne and they say, "Oh, is he done? Are his legs going?" And he just always turns up with moments. Even last season, the assist for the goal with the Haaland goal, it's just, he's been doing that for the last 9 years. It's incredible how he's managed to stay this consistent. His crossing, his passing, his shooting, he is a perfect midfield player. Absolutely perfect. And we're going to be talking about players like Kevin De Bruyne for years to come. Everyone's got nostalgic views and stuff, but you have to take your nostalgia out of it and you need to balance it. You've got your old players that you used to grow up watching, you've got your current ones, and no one likes a current guy coming along spoiling the party, because nostalgia always stays in our mind. But he is in that company, and he is unbelievable and unstoppable, and he deserves to be in the top 2. And if people want to call him the best midfielder of the Premier League era, I've seen most players in the Premier League era, and he is up there. He is definitely up there, and he just deserves all the accolades he gets, because he's one of the most gifted footballers we've ever seen in the Premier League, and Kevin De Bruyne gets second. So we've gone through some good players. Certain players have missed out. I'd love to put Rodri in the top 10, players like him, but I think same with the De Bruyne example. I think Rodri needs a good couple of years now. Remember, he's injured for the season, so he's not going to be around for this season, so he's got to then pick it up next season. If he picks it up after that for the next 3 years, then he'll make the top 10. But right now I'm holding off Rodri. Now, first place is Patrick Vieira. For me, the greatest midfielder I've ever seen in the Premier League era. The greatest midfielder. No one tops Patrick Vieira for me. I think Thierry Henry summed it up as well when he said he's the only player who could have played alone in midfield. You could play 4-1-5. He would manage it. He would, because he was Patrick Vieira. His size was just unbelievable. This guy would control the ball and just knock it over players' heads. These are grown men, and he would just chest it, pop the ball over their heads, and go again. He was the heartbeat. I've spoken about Roy Keane being the heartbeat of Manchester United. He was the heartbeat of Arsenal Football Club for 9 years. He was the man. He was at a couple of periods. There was a few years he was considered by many as the best player in the world at one point. And every single summer, teams like Real Madrid, they wanted him. It was always Patrick Vieira. I mean, United wanted him at one point. And he would have, Ferguson, there's truth in that. Ferguson wanted him. Every team wanted Patrick Vieira. He won 3 league titles of Arsenal, and it should have been more. He controlled everything. He was great in the tackle. He was great at driving the ball forward. And every time Arsenal were going for a bit of a dry spell, they'd look to Omri, but they'd also look through their leader, Patrick Vieira. They'd look for him to turn up with a bit of magic. And he might not have had the technique that a player like Scholes had or Gerrard, but that doesn't determine a good midfielder. Obviously, having technical ability, especially in the modern game, it helps. But it's not just about that. It's about positional awareness. It's about covering spaces. It's about leadership. It's more than just being a good passer. And Patrick Vieira had everything. He had a bit of everything, but it was at an elite level. He was just magical. He's won everything in the game as well, apart from the Champions League. Although he wasn't really part of the 2010 Inter team, so I don't think you can give him that Champions League title. But it's the only thing that he didn't win. He won everything with France. And I still, to this day, I don't think I've seen any better than Patrick Vieira in the Premier League in terms of midfielders. I don't think I ever will. And yeah, he's number one for me. He's number one, and any team would have had him. I'm just even picturing him now, looking back at it in my head. It just, honestly, I get shivers talking about it, because the amount of games, hundreds and hundreds of games I watched of Patrick Vieira, and I still to this day re-watch 90-minute games just to remind myself of how good he was, because I need to keep convincing myself players are coming all the time, and you need to remind yourself of of the players you used to watch. Were they as good as you thought, or was it just nostalgia? He was good. He was good, and I don't know, I just feel, yeah, Patrick Vieira's top for me. He's top. He had everything. He was your classic box-to-box midfield player. And the term box-to-box midfielder does get overused, but he was, and he epitomised it. He was world-class, and he was another one who at times felt like he was playing with a bunch of kids. It felt like he was just a giant playing with under-12s. Honestly, magical midfield player, and fully deserving of the first place.